Welcome to the Gen AI podcast, where the future meets fun and tech talk trends. Get ready to dive into the world of artificial intelligence like never before. Your hosts, Dale, Alan, Greg, and Val, are about to take you on a wild ride through the AI universe. So, buckle up, tune in, and let the AI adventure begin.
Hello, everyone, and a very warm welcome to episode 15 of the Gen AI podcast. Yes, you've heard it here. We're well into the teens now. We have managed to get to 15 without Val on this podcast, which is fantastic if you ask me. But we do have Mr. Greg Lawton back after a bit of a hiatus for a couple of episodes. How are you doing, Greg?
I'm very good. Nice that work's tailing down a little bit.
Yes, I was commenting before we hit record that you're such a busy man. You're missing episodes of Gen AI podcast. You're missing your shaving routine as well. You're growing a decent beard there, I see. You're missing your hairdresser appointments. The hair's growing nice and long. Family all well?
Family's great. It's actually, I don't know if it's after seeing you or something. My wife actually said, "Oh, maybe we should try. Maybe you might want to try growing the beard out a bit and see how it looks." So I thought I'm going to go for that. The hair, yeah, that's actually just me traveling too many countries and not enough Saturday morning hairdressing appointments. So that's going this Saturday.
Great. Well, I can't comment on hair myself, but yeah, I don't think it's my looks that your wife's after. It's probably your own, but we do miss L as well. We should mention him. Wish you well, L. I think you're looking after an ill little one, but Calpol helps, I think, from experience. So there we go. Look, there's a few episodes you missed, Greg, but there's still plenty to talk about. We've explored various areas in the past couple of episodes, and I think the listeners particularly enjoyed the last one where I put Al on the spot a little bit and sort of challenge him on what Nplan's releasing and what they're doing, and it was great because I think we need to ensure that people are understanding what's available to them out in the market.
Mm-hmm.
And whilst we've set out that this podcast is never ever going to be a sales podcast, it was quite an interesting one because it was more, I think, appropriate to the listenership, which was fantastic as well. But one of the things I wanted to chat about was self-service reporting off the back of last episode, because we're seeing the likes of, Claude Sonnet, for example. You'll see people posting on LinkedIn about how you can take project data, put it into these large language models and start asking it for, charts and graphs and outputs and analytics and things like that. Where do you see the industry heading with self-service reporting?
So my view is we're entering the world of GaaS, GaaS it's called,
Okay.
which is governance as a service, and in reports within large enterprises in which governance dominates, you have official reports and you have ad hoc reports. An official report is a piece of paper that's produced that goes in storage somewhere or gets submitted or whatever, and is part of the audit record. The unofficial or ad hoc reports are almost like a conversation you go and have with someone, because the transferring of a piece of information is a report in some regard. Like if I define report as the capturing and transfer of information, in that regard, I see us entering a world whereby analytics and that reporting is now to a very large extent automated. You will have a small number of very highly qualified people essentially controlling the settings. So what can be reported, how calculations are done, what reports look like. But fundamentally, the number of people involved in the process from when the information is created and captured to when the information is consumed, that pipeline, the number of people actually involved in doing activities in that pipeline is going to diminish substantially, and the overseers is going to grow an element. But what that essentially means is you get scalability much greater scalability within those pipes. So yeah, this is where I'm seeing, it is. Is it fun to stick some data and some prompts into a large language model and get something out? Yes. Is it end game? No, it's absolutely not. End game is the proper report format with all of the logos, the checks, the balances, the processes, the sign-offs, the governance. All of that is in an automated pipeline stream. So that's where I see the industry going.
You mention sort of standard or governance type regular reporting, official reporting versus ad hoc. Do both of those fall under GaaS? GaaS?
It's quite funny. So the ad hoc reporting technically might not fall under GaaS. If I define governance as four things, so governance is standards, processes, and RACI, so responsibility matrices, checks and balances, and analytics. So, for example, a check and balance is an independent audit of whether or not a standard has been applied and the process has been followed correctly. And then the analysis is, okay, given everything we do, how many people follow process, that kind of thing. If it's one of those four things, the independent reporting isn't part of a formal process, but could be an application of a standard. So it's almost a spit out of that. What I'd say is independent reporting will rely on GaaS, but might not be in the framework of GaaS itself.
Okay, that's interesting. And so if I put on a organization or projects hat, they all have different governance structures and different requirements to be governed against. How does that then, if we're doing GaaS governance as a service, and there's presumably there's a service provider in this, and you're
Potentially.
signing up to
Yeah,
it?
well, if technology is doing it, if the business hasn't invented the technology itself and they're paying simply for access and IP rights of information, then it is a service.
How do we tailor organizations, governance structures, policies into a service provision from an external party?
Well, let's think about how it's done today. The simple answer is you allow them to set it up the way that they wish it to be set up. Let's think about how it's done today. Companies will produce overall frameworks and governance documentation. Some will be guidelines, some will be hard coded. So, for example, a guideline is, or hard coded would be every project needs to go through these gate points. A guideline would be this gate point can include but doesn't have to these components. Another hard coded one is you will follow proper accountancy laws, like things like this. So these companies will have documentation, and then what they have is some systems, but mainly it's people in place. It's checks and balances in that something can't proceed unless somebody has signed off on it. And the check and balance is, have you got the approval of a number of people to proceed through a certain process? The way I see it is that you can have many standards, you can have different processes, and then you can pick the standards and the processes that apply to a specific situation and then just apply them. So, for example, let's say that you and I were working on a contract together, and let's say, people wanted a certain number of scheduled health checks done that are specific to that organization. So that would be the standard. And let's say the process was I did the checks, I sent the report to you, you signed it off, and then it went into, reporting. That's a super simple process, but we've applied a unique standard, a unique process to then fulfill a governance requirement. And what a service would be in this instance is we'd record that on a system, and then a system will automate all of the analytics of the actual applications of the standard, automate all of the notifications and backwards and forwards, capture it all in audit logs, and be able to then use that data at a portfolio risk level to start to understand where standards and processes are different and not being applied properly.
Okay. So we've touched, I think, there on benefits near the end, and we've spoken primarily along features. Now, you know better than me that when it comes to products, what makes a difference aren't the features, it's the benefits. And so
Yep.
what are the tangible benefits for GaaS?
So at a base level, on a project level, it just massively simplifies all of the process adherence that needs to be done. You and I have definitely worked in projects where we've combined, like, got lots of documents together, said, right, let's go forward, and then, oh, you forgot this one bit, and it's because it's hidden in page 74 of a piece of paper. And so it's it just massively simplifies that. And rather than us putting in our calendars thinking, oh, I must do this by this date, you have just reminders coming through. But the real benefit is at an organizational level, because what it essentially enables people to do is two things. One is to properly assess the actual risk exposure that they have, and governance is there to do two things. One is to maintain quality of standards such that brand reputation doesn't get put at risk, and the other is to protect financial performance so that you don't take on risk and liabilities that you cannot stomach. And that, so the first component is that. The second component is learning. If you've got an accurate view of what's happening across the portfolio, you can learn and act on it. So if you see a trend going in the wrong direction, you can investigate it immediately rather than waiting 18 months for something bad to happen, call in external consultants or try and understand why, and then, oops, now we have to improve the processes.
And does this then give us the ability to test our governance processes and procedures as well? Because how do we know that our governance actually is giving us the desired outcomes that we want? We don't always know. So by using that, I guess, on the job learning as we're going along, we have the ability to then adjust our governance structures, policies, processes, etc. I'm assuming here. And so is there two things? There's one thing is there's automation providing governance as a service through the likes of technology to speed things up, make things quicker, get trends in terms of how we are delivering according to those actual processes and policies. And then there's a byproduct here where we can actually on the fly assess our governance processes.
You can also on the fly change governance. So think if governance today is a series of documents that then people are trained on, that then people apply. So if you want to change governance, what you have to do is change the document and then train the people and then hope that the people apply it properly. That is actually quite a laborious and time-consuming process, and it's subject to error. Whereas if governance is broken down into standards, processes, and checks, checks are automated. So you're looking at standards and processes are hard-coded. The administrators of the AI systems and the platforms can change them, and it doesn't require people to be trained on it because it can just be a notification. This step has been adjusted. You now need to do this to proceed through this gate. Here's the list of things you need to do. It's democratization, really.
Yeah, I was about to say that you've put a lot of thought into this clearly over the past couple of weeks we haven't spoken, and it's great. I love that you're constantly coming up with new ideas. And in the last episode, I put Al on a spot a little bit about what he's doing at Enplan. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit about nodes and links. Is this something you're actively looking now at putting in and building into your product?
To be decided. This is actually just something. So, if we talk about like product development at Nodes and Links, I sit right at the front and I kind of think really deeply about the business models and how the industry works. And I go and talk with hundreds of people in the industry and analyze their workflows and understand that. And then Behind me are obviously all of our customers who put in their wants and then product. I can't say if this is absolutely something that's going to be done, but this is something that I've been very focused on, because once you've got to, you and I have spoke about how AI is essentially going to impact users and managers at the ground level for a very long time, to the point where I was almost exhausting thinking on that. Like, I've got what I'd consider to be some incredibly robust mental models of actually how that's going to emerge and how that's going to play out. But then if you actually go and talk to the senior vice presidents and the managing directors and these people are concerned with words like culture and governance. And really, when you dive to the heart of what that is, it's the predictable control of systems and people that you do not have control, that you do not interact with. So how does the managing director of BA Systems, or how does the managing director of Bechtel actually make sure that on a project certain work is being done that materially de-risks the business? It's governance and processes and procedures. And actually, what I found is there's very, very few people in our industry who truly understand how you actually properly construct those things. Like, normally, a lot of the companies go and get the top tier consultants like BCG and McKinsey to come in and help them think through that. But just personally, I found it fascinating, even talking to people like BCG and reading all of the textbooks about how you actually design all of these systems. For an engineer, it makes total sense. Like, the actual processes and the equations make total sense. And essentially, to directly answer your question and come full circle, is this something that's going to be in Nodes and Links? We shall see, but it's definitely something that I think is the next horizon of artificial intelligence deployed into enterprise organizations.
Yeah, and at the risk of agreeing with you too much, because our listeners want a bit of conflict and a bit of discourse and debate, but the thing with governance is that, one, it's incredibly boring, and two, it's incredibly hard to get right. Yeah. And so it's actually primed for machine learning or AI. If you think about it from that perspective, it's not like I don't know anyone that wakes up or starts their career and goes, I want to get into governance. I want to write governance for
I know a couple of people now. I know like 2 or 3 people who are genuinely like that.
Are they lawyers?
They play computer games. Certain computer games. Very fun computer games.
Yeah. Those that like to write the law or the rules. So yes, I can see it from that perspective. The other thing that I think that governance should be, and I've been quite clear with this in previous conversations, is that for me, governance shouldn't be speed bumps. It shouldn't slow you down. It should be more like guide rails. So bowling alley, you got the guide rails up.
I would actually, this is a point of disagreement. Technically, clear disagreement. It is guide rails and speed bumps. The purpose of governance is to maximize upside and minimize downside. And the specific risks, negative risk, because risk can be opportunity and threat, specific threats that hard governance is there to protect against is company destroying risk. And company destroying risk is low probability, high impact. So Carillion, that kind of thing. And actually, let's take something like signing a contract with payment periods and liabilities. You want both guide rails and speed bumps in that, because speed bumps introduce friction, and you want specific components of friction to enable people to get together and really consider all of the eventualities. If you had no speed bumps, things fly through too quickly, and you haven't considered everything when it gets to the end of the road, and you find yourself sitting on a huge amount of liability or risk. Whereas speed bumps, which are the gate reviews, are there to makes sure that the proper preparation has been done in parallel to do that. Now, I had a conversation with one of our joint friends the other week about these governance processes cost a significant amount of money, and I did some rough calculations, and I was like, okay, let's say that in a large enterprise, following governance costs an extra 50 million a year. Over 10 years, that's $500 million. But let's say that one company-ending risk occurs every 10 years that would wipe $1 billion of value off the company. It's a 2-to-1 investment. It is worthwhile wasting $500 million of people's time to do that kind of thing. And then the guide rails are obviously that is containment of unknown risk, essentially. So, a guide rail would be, we're a construction company, we don't do software. And I've actually seen quite a few software construction companies say, oh, we're going to make AI software now. And I'm like, you're experts at signing prime contracts, interfacing between multiple subcontractors, procuring on a supply chain, designing using waterfall, high value large capital assets. What point of that process makes you think that you're world leading in agile software development or data science or product management? Like, that is where, to be honest, I'd be like, a guide rail has failed here. You have gone outside of the capabilities of the business without, for example, acquiring or merging with even a basic company who has those capabilities.
Why do organizations think that way? Is it because all of a sudden they can use ChatGPT and so the world becomes easy and everything they can do everything?
My honest opinion, and this, I might use too hard language, so when you're listening to this, water it down for me. 2 reasons. One, when you start to look at a new market, everything seems super easy and everything seems figured out until then you look at it and then you realize you know nothing. And then, then when you really experience and you realize, then you really build up the knowledge. So it's when people hit that first peak. And the second element is it's non-entrepreneurial middle managers trying to get promoted, and they don't have to carry the buck of the failure that they're about to build. So they'll say, this is innovative. I want to see innovative. They'll do it for a year. They'll move on. And then that peak will have passed, and then they'll realize how difficult it is and how much money it takes. They're gone by then. And by non-entrepreneurial, what I mean is people who haven't got the capabilities of 0 to 1 product and company building. And those are very, very specific skills that both you and I know because you built mobile from the ground up.
Yeah. And I was just thinking of the Peter principle. Is this where people rise to their level of incompetence and then just move on?
It's pretty, yes. For me, from what I've seen, that's the absolute perfect example. It's the equivalent of me going, I'm going to be a prime contractor. And then you're like, you make AI, you do software for a living. Like, what do you know about that? Now, to me, obviously, I've been in the industry, but I'm like, oh, how hard can it be? It's just a bunch of contracts, supply chain, do some governance stuff, bid on some stuff. I'm pretty sure there's some bid managers listening to this going, you know nothing, son. Like, there's so much particularities with these bids and blah, blah, blah. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah, and this is why we have all the different professions that make projects successful, and the different types of tech as well. But I find it fascinating, this governance as a service, because it's something different. I don't, it's to my knowledge, it's not been done before, and maybe listeners can sort of comment on whether or not. Has it? Okay.
Yeah. Amazon.
Can you share?
Amazon.com.
Right.
Can you get a product delivered to your house without paying?
Okay.
Governance as a service works when you don't realize it's there.
Okay.
Can you transfer money from your bank account without having money deducted from your bank account? Because that's a loss. That is a risk to a bank. Can that physically happen? Well, in the olden days, when money was literally paper, and you'd walk into the safe and do that, and the old day of checks, remember check had to clear?
Yep.
So people might think that that's a silly example. It's not. People used to deposit fake checks, take the money out, and then the bank would go, this check is fake, and lose the money. You could literally take money you didn't have out of the bank. Can you do that anymore with online banking?
No, you can't.
Has anyone noticed that they can't? Is that like, oh wow, yeah, they have actually done that? Governance as a service. The governance is being provided by the app on your phone.
Yes,
plus
I guess
the systems in the back end.
Yeah, so we're borrowing from other industries in terms of how they've implemented subliminally, or not subliminally, but unconsciously to the
It's
user.
systematization. So what I mean by this, so governance follows a development framework of, and this is, I've never read this anywhere, this is just how I picture it in my mind, so it may be wrong, but governance follows a development framework of creation, processization, and then systematization. Creation is you and me sitting down going, I think this would be a good process, and we're going to try and just tell people to do the right thing as business leaders. Processization is actually writing the process documents down and getting people to implement it, whereas that's where most businesses are today. Systematization is flipping the equation on its head. So rather than here's a bunch of documents that people use, and by the way, people use tech to achieve tasks, you flip it on the head. Here's a bunch of documents that are embedded in tech, and by the way, tech is used by people to do things. Perfect example of this is SAP. And expenses. Can you approve your expenses in a large company without attaching the receipts and without giving a reason why, if you haven't attached a receipt, why there's no receipt?
Yeah. No,
It's
good point.
systematized.
So the thing that I think of that springs to mind immediately, document management systems.
Yeah.
As boring as they are, the CMARs of the world, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Are those governance as a service today?
They're not governance as a service, because governance as a service I've defined as the application of standards, processes, notifications, and analytics. They are
What do they
things like
lack?
CMAR is
Yeah.
is at its heart a database. So you store a certain piece of data in there, and you are able to query that data. There are some features that are formal process, but it's not. It's you'd almost have to really squint and force GaaS in there, as opposed to looking at it like a database and going, oh, and it's built analytics and some processes on top. What I'd say is, if CMAR develops into a full cloud system where it's got a full process module of full change control, all the way from engineering and the PMO, all the way through to contract manager and signature, integrates things like DocuSign in there, like if it does all of that, then storing the contract in there just becomes an enabler of the main value, then it will be GaaS.
Okay, that's interesting. And then also the analytics part, which you mentioned, is one of the four key areas of GaaS, because if you're then actually looking at taking the data, analyzing that against actual delivery, so what's actually happened, so in effect, we could do people out of a job when it comes to delay analysis and lawyers understanding who's at fault and things like that, potentially, or no, not that far.
No, not that far. That's going to be incredibly difficult, because when you actually go to court, you need interview logs and these kinds of things. Now, could I imagine a world where that is largely automated? Yes, but I think there's two kinds of things here. And here, what we're talking, it's worth saying that when I say analytics, people will probably misread this as portfolio analytics, and portfolio analytics is very poorly defined in our industry. You've got three kinds of portfolio analytics. So you've got in project line, You've got project portfolio analytics, which is what projects am I doing and am I getting a return on the business case and am I investing in the right projects? You've got project performance analytics, which is, are my projects on time? Are my projects on budget? Are my projects within my risk parameters? And then you've got project governance analytics, which is process and standards being followed? That they answer subtly different questions on those fronts. Now, when I talk conversations about GaaS, specifically when it comes to analytics, I'm talking about the third element of that, which is very slightly different.
Yeah, I think it's also because it's such a, well, first time I've discussed it with anyone, with you now. Because it's emerging as well. It's quite an interesting one because it will evolve with any emerging tech, service, product. And I'd really be interested, actually, to those that listen to this episode, what you think about GaaS and how you think it'll benefit you and your project. Because ultimately, whatever we do on projects, whether it's tech, whether it's AI, whether it's a new process, a new skill set, it has to benefit people and outcomes of projects. And
so I'll give you a day in the life. This is just so people can really. I anticipate walking to my desk in the morning, turn on my computer, and then my little robot comes up and says, "You have 5 notifications. 1 of them needs to be addressed today. 2 need to be addressed by the end of the week." And I go, cool. And I look at it, and the one I need to address today is an approval for annual leave. And the 2 I need to address by the end of the week are the approval of the project update and the project change reports that go into the official reporting cycle. And it's just simple. And I'm like, okay, cool. And I don't have to think about these things. They're already done for me. What I'm really thinking about is, the people-to-people interaction and actually delivering the project. It's, I'm focusing on the 1 to 3 things that matter, not the 4 to 100 that are annoying. That's ultimately where this will end up.
So it's about making lives easier, creating more time for doing the things that are really important on projects. If I simplify it, it's really difficult. We spoke about this previously.
No, that's it. Because people are the unit of value, and I don't say that in a cultural way. I say that as a genuine business model way. People are the unit of value of enterprises and the economy, unless you're a financial organization, really. But if I'm paying someone 100,000 a year and they're producing 50 units of work, and then of those 50 units of work, 10 of them are governance things that are really just protecting downside, and I can reduce that to 2 units, I get another 8 units of work out of that person for basically zero cost. Like it's that kind of thinking. It's how do I, without requiring people to work more hours, get more valuable work out of people that I'm paying money for less cost than the value they create. That's ultimately what it comes down to.
Yeah, and if it comes back to it, right? You mentioned you speak to a lot of business leaders, and governance is one aspect, culture is the other. But I guess both of those are intertwined with productivity rates as well.
Yeah, well, I've when it comes to culture, I've been quite annoyed at the lack of official definitions around the industry, and
What are some of the definitions you've heard? Or what is it for you as well?
There isn't anyone.
Okay,
Like people are like, culture is how people feel. Culture is how we work together. I'm like, what does that even mean? Like how do I measure that? Like the mental model I use in my head is culture are the decisions that people make, like on a day-to-day basis, when they're not being watched by mum and dad. That's ultimately what culture is. So, if can, like, this remote working do people log on at 9 and log off at 5 and genuinely do the best day's work that they possibly can? As opposed to, do people log in, wiggle their mouse, and then head off out with their dog? It's that kind of component now. How AI and GaaS and stuff come into culture, I have no idea. I haven't even thought about that. That is beyond my... I can't process that in my head right now. That is incredibly complex.
It's a big topic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
GaaS is easier compared to that, because GaaS is literally, I've written down this process. How do I make it so that people don't need to put effort applying it? That's a very simple train of thought. Thinking about, well, what are the decisions that people could make, and how do I properly define and measure culture? I'll leave that to the consultants of the world.
Yeah, someone that springs to mind is Joe Lucas. She always talks about mycelium, and we know mycelium's sort of the hidden communications channels of how forests are all connected through fungi and the works, and how forests actually talk to each other, different plants talk to each other, and it's about understanding that mycelium and that network of invisible relationships, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, incredibly difficult. But look, I know we're sort of heading towards the end of this one. We don't want to make them too long. We want to make them short, sharp, and give people something to think about, something to consider, and something to listen to. I want to also, because it's pretty cool. So I put Al on the spot in the last episode, going, "Hey, look, AI Day was great. I think we should share some of the cool stuff you're doing." Whenever I log into Nodes and Links, right, and I know you're going to feel uncomfortable doing this, well, because I know you don't want this to be a sales podcast. I always get these little, these updates on new features and functionality and things like that. And I think there's probably a lot of listeners that haven't used Nodes and Links, so it's probably good for us to actually explore some of the things you've been doing, because I personally find them very, very useful. I mean, for a long time now, I've told you this, my favorite feature has always been the comparing the schedule. Because a lot of the projects we work on have NEC, and there's a submission every period, whether that's every 4 weeks or every month, and you need to compare what's changed, whether you accept or reject that schedule, etc., etc. Practically, for me, that was one of my favorites. But there's a lot more that your product can do and has been doing. But if this was your one chance, and I am putting you on the spot here to sell in an elevator pitch, what some of the cool things you're doing at Nodes and Links is, what would you say they are?
Well, I can just tell you the themes of development.
Sure.
We have 3 themes of development, which is automation, predictive AI, and generative AI. Automation is about making your day as easy as possible. So, compare something like that. Prediction is about essentially learning from historic data and key research, and giving a independent third eye view to the user that they can respectfully take on or delete if they want, because that's what it is. And that comes into risk and forecasting. And then generative AI is actually in 2 components. Number 1 is enabling people to communicate with the machine using human language, because generative AI can work both directions. Like, you type in, and what it does is it turns it to code and then sends it off. So, for example, you can actually say, provide me a comparison report between these 2 schedules, provide it in a tabular format. I'm interested in these KPIs, and it'll do that for you. And the other way around, so you've got a piece of data and you say, explain this data to me, what am I looking at? That then goes into the 2 kinds of reporting. So you've got the formal and informal reporting. So setting up the proper reporting templates and just having the generative AI just complete them every time you do a schedule upload. But also the informal ones where you can just give it to anyone on the project and they can ask and interrogate questions, and it will go away and do analysis. That's essentially what we're working on. And the updates is it's the belief that we need to constantly challenge ourselves to be better and to deliver more value to the user, because that is what they deserve. I will not have considered what we do to be a success until people are saying that that genuinely changed my entire career for the better, and my entire, my entire working life for the better. And I want to get to the point where you can just physically speak to the AI in meetings and just say, hey, this milestone has been delayed. Why? And it goes, give me 4 seconds. It's been delayed because these things happened. This is that. That's actually that supplier. You've got a meeting with them on Tuesday. We're probably about 12 to 18 months away from that.
Wow, that's pretty exciting stuff. And if I may, because the listeners want a bit of challenge, Greg, what's the difference? So those that have never used it, and the way you just explained it, I can put stuff in, I can interrogate it, it can tell me what I'm looking at, it can tell me look at trends and stuff. What's the difference between that and me just chucking all of that information into ChatGPT and it doing the same thing for me?
No, a couple of things. One, automation. ChatGPT is super cool, but you have to explain every single time what you're doing. Number 2 is precision. It actually can't do quite a lot of the analysis. It can't do the complex network analysis and the things like critical path method to the certain degrees. Number 3 is hallucinations. Is that? Number 4 is tailoring to the actual industry that we're in. And I'd argue the point I'd argue back is, if a true general artificial intelligence emerged, every company would disappear. Everyone. Because I'd be like, why do you need PowerPoint? Why do you need Word? Why do you need Excel? Why do you even need to work? Like, you don't need to work anymore. It's to that level. We're nowhere near that level. Specificity matters, and hallucinations matter. So, with those 2 things, that is why you're actually seeing a lot of rapid growth products emerge in all industries.
Yes, but you don't have to describe AI in that way when it comes to hallucinations and general context. I think a lot of humans do that as well.
Yeah, it's called getting it wrong, but like we've all seen. My perfect example is, do you know that law that those lawyers are actually got reported to the bar because it created a case law. They used GPT and it created a case law that never existed, and they submitted that, etc., etc. That is literally what we're talking about in Project Land. If you stick data into GPT like that, there is a chance it'll get it wrong and it'll just make stuff up, and it doesn't understand the context. So that is actually why it's such a hard challenge, and that's why companies like those and Links and Nplan exist, is to actually solve those challenges for the specifics.
And I guess just to end off, you're saying the AGI will not grant us that specificity that
no,
we're
if
looking
it's
for, that
true AGI, which is essentially an intelligence which knows all of human intelligence and can process it better than any human. We're talking proper Terminator kind of levels of AGI. Then yes, but I'm like, but that doesn't exist. It's the logical fallacy of ad infinitum.
Will it exist?
Will it exist? I don't know. I'd say probably not. Only from the fact that it is not to humans' benefit, and humans get incredibly aggressive when things aren't to their benefit. If at some point AGI existed, and let's say 10 million people in the UK got put out of work, I'm pretty sure a data center would burn down pretty quickly. At which point AGI is dead, and you're like, okay, cool.
If they got put out of work but could maintain their lifestyle and their income,
that's it. That's it. To be very specific, to be very okay, we're gonna go. I'm going. The entire economy of the world, the endpoints are humans. Humans want something, and humans give something. Everything in the middle is a transformation or a transaction. So it's turning water into wine and then passing it on in some way. So even the financial, the only way in my mind that AGI would, there's only 2 ways that AGI would persist. One is if it was to the benefit of the majority, of all of those people. Or the second is if we as humans allowed AGI to gain human rights. Because then the endpoint, you could have an AI transacting through the economy with an AI, and those are endpoints in itself. But essentially, that really calls into question, well, what is a human? And I think, given what I've seen in the last couple of years, I think that that's probably a conversation that's going to be had in about 30 years' time.
And on that note, folks, we'll end this. That is a huge topic, human rights for AI or AGI. Greg, you've been amazing as a sparring partner as always. I love kicking the tires with you and throwing around what could be, what is, and what shouldn't be. And yeah, we'll continue to pump out these episodes. It's good to talk to you and see that you're well. Get acquainted with your razor again, or maybe your wife doesn't want you to.
No, I'm now past the itchy point. I'm getting to the point where it's
past
actually yeah. I look in the mirror and I'm thinking,
yeah, you pull it off. You've got the height as well.
Long beard looks great rather than childish jaw.
Stubble. Yeah, no, you got it. You got it all. You got the looks. You got the skill. You got the charisma. He's got it all, ladies and gents. If you want to get in touch with Greg, reach out to him on LinkedIn. He's good fun as well in person. But look, folks, we have delivered another episode. Hopefully you've learned something from it. If not, let us know, as per usual. It's always good spending about 40-odd minutes, 45 minutes with you. So thank you for listening, and we'll catch up with you on the next one. Bye for now.